Awesome.
It's only taken us 19, it's only placing us close to 2 years, but we've finally figured out how to use Zoom, everybody. So that is fantastic.
Okay, folks, I'm just going to ask, can you just put your microphones on mute, please? That'd be much appreciated. Okay. All right. I think we've got everyone muted except Adam and myself. Look, good morning and welcome. I'm going to spare us a really, really long introduction this morning. Many of you have been here before, many of you have not. What we like to do is it's our hour of power when it comes to Canvas, to try and share some ideas, learn some things. I want you to get really busy in the chat. That's my request here. So open that chat panel, get really busy in there. If you hear something that you like, tell us that you like it. If you have a question, ask the question. Ask the question. We're going to try and get as much conversation as we can going in this hour. But we do have a topic today, and we have a panel of legends. So Kerry Buttery from Vet Nexus, Marita Bird from TAFE, and Gillian Ridden, Tommy K12. Gillian, good to have you here, folks. You guys are going to be the experts, but to do this in a relatively organised fashion, we've got some specific topics that these guys are going to lead us through this morning, and I'm going to be asking Kerry to kick off in a moment. And Kerry's going to start talking about some really big picture issues. Now, everything with this panel today is all about modernising assessment with Canvas. So it's all about how we use Canvas and use the tools and the plugins and all the bits and pieces that we've got in Canvas to create more assessments and do it in modern ways. So please don't hesitate to take notes. Tell us what you like in the chat. And as Adam's indicated, the chat transcript will be available as part of the recording as well. So you'll get access to all the good ideas that people share in the chat. So Kerry's going to get started. She's going to be talking about some of the big picture issues with respect to designing assessments. And I've got an insight into some things that Kerry's going to talk about. So you'll want to have your ears wide open for this. And she's going to be talking about learning versus assessment, some of the other really big issues and that are relevant to compliance. Then Marita is going to dive in, and Marita's going to lead us through a discussion about quiz and assessment design. So get into some of the nitty gritty. And then Julian's going to be like a bear in a cage waiting to let loose towards the end. And he's going to be talking about leveraging technology for better assessment, which is right in Julian's pocket. So firstly, good morning, Kerry, Marita, Julian. I hope you're all ready to go. And let's kick off with you, Kerry. You got some big picture issues you want to lead us into to start this discussion this morning. Good morning, Kerry.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks to everyone for being here. This is fantastic. Such a big group. I think the group's growing very, very quickly, which is great. What I was going to bring up first of all today is talking about the idea of what is training versus what is assessment. And there is, Adam, close your ears. Something that has led to the breaking down of small quizzes is that we don't have build on last attempt. So, so often we break these quizzes down into smaller quizzes so that we don't have to have our learners going through and, doing a 20 question quiz multiple times. So, we go 5 questions in a quiz. What that does, though, is depending on where we put those quizzes, it then impacts whether we are doing formative assessment or summative assessment. And it's very tempting to scatter the quizzes throughout the learning. And what happens then is we're actually doing formative assessment. We're looking at how a student's going. It's assessment, but we're checking on their progress. And because they've just done the learning and we've quizzed them straight away, we haven't made sure that they've developed that knowledge and skill over time. So something that ASQA has been looking at when it comes to our compliance and audits is, have we got that separation between the training and the assessment? Have we got that happening over time? And are we giving the learners the opportunity to practice and refine their knowledge before we assess them? So try and avoid having shorter quizzes that are scattered throughout your learning, unless you're going to do those as formative. So for sure, go and throw them in there, but don't rely on those as your final summative assessment. What you could then have a look at is if you do have quizzes, and Marita's going to talk about question types and those sorts of things, so I'm not going to go too far into that, but have a look at what you do have in those formative quizzes. And it might be that they are more the auto-marked style of activity, but also look at what your unit requires with language literacy and numeracy, and whether you are meeting those foundation skills through the quizzes that you're using, because sometimes you're actually better off doing an assignment for some things. It might be that you can use the short answer option in your quizzes, but sometimes it's going to be that bigger assignment that, yes, it does become an upload, but we do have annotation options now as well when we're remarking our students' work. But think about LLN in your assessment as well. The other component to mention here is when we have our assessment practical, think about how you're capturing your observable behaviours, and you've got decision-making tools. So the two ways that we see that as well, whether it's a uploaded checklist that you've done on a PDF, or you might have done it on a document, scanned it, uploaded, or you might actually be using your rubrics for creating those checklists. So have a look at how you're capturing the evidence of your skills assessment as well as the knowledge. I think they're the key things that I wanted to sort of bring up. We've got a couple of questions there, or are we going to do them at the end, Damien?
Kerry, if you see questions that we can answer now, let's go for it.
Okay. Rosie, H5P quizzes, self-marked, embedded in the learning. Yep, so you guys have done that. I think you've done that as, yeah, the formative stuff so that they are throughout. If you do use H5P, be careful. H5P say don't use this for your summative assessment because if your students are clever, they can sort of get into that inspect element component and have a look. But like what Rosie's talking about, what they do there, that's throughout the learning. So it's fine. And it makes it more interactive for learners as well.
Kerry, Kerry, can you just head back a step, because Colleen's asked the question, what is H5P? So you might want to just explain what it is for the benefit of everyone. Thanks, Colleen, for asking the question.
Yep. Hopefully I'm not jumping in on what Julian's going to do later. H5P is a HTML5 tool that you can use to create interactive learning, basically, for your students. So many things that you can do really, really easily. So and you just embed it, or if you're using h5p.com, it's an LTI. And that means that you are on your page in Canvas editing content. You can click on the little LTI button, the plug, and it brings it up. You can then insert all sorts of different content types. And Damien, something I'm really excited about is this week, the crossword has been released.
Oh,
so you can have an interactive crossword on your screen for students to complete.
That's awesome. H5P's just got so much functionality, so many options, so good for creating interactive training, and I can use it. It's that easy. So yeah, strongly recommend it to you as well. As Grace said, super interactive and engaging for students, which is great. There's a question here from Jordan, Kerry. What do you see as the difference between training and assessment?
Yeah, so training's going to be when you are imparting knowledge, developing knowledge with your learners, demonstrating how they need to do something. You would then have formative assessment along the way where you're checking if they're going okay. That might be through auto-marked activities, but it might also be through some things where you're going to mark some work that they've handed in, but it's not a final assessment, so to speak. When we get to the summative assessment, this is the stuff that we are saying to the student, do you feel ready to be assessed against this unit of competency? Have you covered what you need to know? Do you understand? And then we would conduct assessment with the learners. So it's that formal assessment process rather than relying on just the evidence of of the learning. So if we had a workbook that students were completing, they went through, like they were reading information and they were answering questions as they went, that's learning. If we then wanted to conduct an assessment on that, we would actually back that up with something else to confirm that they've understood all of that information and that they can explain to you what something means or can do something. So we really need to make sure that in the learning, we're not assessing the learning as we go and using that for an outcome. We're assessing the learning as we go so that we know how well a student is understanding something. And then the assessment will be when we're confident that they'll be able to successfully demonstrate what they know. How'd that go, Damien? You got anything to add there as the TAE trainer?
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's a great answer. There's a question from Adam. Will we be addressing the issue of plagiarism checks in quizzes, in say text entry responses? Is that something? Is that something?
That was a bit of going, John. No, Philip actually asked that a little bit further up, but I'll
okay.
that now.
Put it down.
There isn't a native plagiarism checker in Canvas at the moment. It's currently controlled by third-party vendors, and none of those third-party vendors have ventured into quizzes just yet. One workaround I have seen, and Kerry, you can provide me some other example, is if you're worried about those paragraphs, using missing words is also a great way to kind of make that around, because they actually have to manually put in the words. They can't just copy a bulk load of text and just throw it in there as well. So there's certain things you can do to kind of negate that. Ultimately, if we had time, I'd love to talk about authentic assessment, but we just...
Add it to the list, Adam. Add it to the list as one of our future topics, because it's a really, really good one.
Yeah, because that's what we are seeing a big shift in it, is like saying, for instance, there's not very many questions every day that we are timed that we need to make an exact decision every day. Like we've got the ability, we've got a mobile phone, we've got these resources that are available. How do we find those resources and how we use them? That's the basis of how we view authentic assessment, but definitely something that we can we can talk about a little bit later as well, to be, about that, because you don't need, plagiarism becomes less important based on the type of question that you're asking.
Kerry, there's a question from Michael in the chat, and I think this maybe gives you a chance to emphasise some of the key points here. And Michael's asked, I just wanted to clarify that we should have a final assessment which formally assesses the competency rather than building it throughout the module. Do you want to address that from Michael?
Yeah, this could depend on what it is that you are doing as a final assessment or what evidence you're gathering throughout. If let's a practical example. If you are getting students to complete a project plan, and part of their assessment is a project plan. Let's say the first one, you're actually stepping them through and teaching them what to put where, explaining how to fill this bit out, what to do over there. And you explain all of that, and they then, okay, we've done that one together. Can I use that as their assessment? People think, can I use that one that I've stepped them through and used as the example and explained? Can I use that as assessment? No, I'm getting a few notes. Yeah, you can't use that one as assessment because that was part of the learning. However, you may then say, okay, well, I've taught you how to do this particular part of your project plan. Now you go and do yours, and then we'll continue on the next part of the topic. So it's how you're going to structure the content so that you do know that you've got appropriate learning activities that they're going to be doing, that you're stepping them through, you're checking that they understand, that they know what they need to do. You might then, after you've shown them how to do that part of the project plan, you might have a quiz, a short quiz that's just sort of refreshing or going back over some of the concepts that they looked at, and that would be learning. Then you would continue on, and the project plan that they've then worked on themselves, that becomes part of their assessment. So you can still collect evidence as you go when it comes to sort of those project things. It's more just, what we don't want to see is a page of content and then an assessment on that page, and then another page of content and an assessment on that page. we want to have a bit more of a learning opportunity for students to work through that content before we formally assess them.
It's about making sure that retention is genuinely there, isn't it, Kerry? That we're not just spoon feeding people so that they give the quick answer. And then we say, okay, we've got our assessment, now we're moving on. It's about showing that recognition and that retention is there. Is that the thrust of what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
We've got a comment that's come in there around, Adam's put it in, can you provide a template to get them started? That's going to depend on the unit of competency. Some units of competency might require them to design something, in which case, no. Other units where they need to complete something, yes, you can. H5P, going back up to the comment further up, H5P has got a really cool document tool where you can actually scaffold learners through stages. You use one of them, don't you, Damien? Where they've actually got a template where you've got a question and they fill that out and it steps them through and scaffolds everything that they do, and then they can export that document at the end. So that way it's teaching them and scaffolding it for them. But yeah, the template depends on the unit of competency and what the requirements of that unit are.
Kerry, is there any final comment you'd like to add at this stage before we transition across to Marita?
Just essentially keep in the back of your mind what you've just said before, Damien. Are we making sure that we're assessing something where we're making sure the students retained that knowledge, they can demonstrate that skill? It's not just they've done an activity as part of their learning and we're using that. Okay, make sure that it's demonstrating their knowledge and their skill that they've retained.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kerry. Everyone, clap for Kerry. Let's give her some encouragement. We don't have to wait till the end.
Silent claps, thank you.
Yes, and what we might do now is move across with Marita. And Marita, you want to share with us today and lead us on a discussion about quiz and assessment design, I believe.
Apparently so. There you go.
I know it's true. Go for it.
It is, absolutely. Thank you. I guess probably the first thing is, and it's going to go back to that same old adage that we do every time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So let's not get all wrapped up in the fact that a quiz can mark our questions for us and we never have to undertake marking again. Because what we have to look at is the assessment design. So going in there first, so don't worry about the tool that you're going to use. Don't worry about how it's going to be used, marked. Don't worry about all those things. Actually come in and design your assessment based on what your unit requires and your industry requires, and then look at the tool that best fits that. So there's lots of options. So a lot of people, same old adage where you go through the knowledge requirements and you can look from, knowledge requirement 1, quiz question 1, knowledge requirement 2, quiz question 2. It just can't happen. It doesn't happen like that in industry. So it really can't happen where we train. So before you look at all those shiny options, work out what you need. Also too, I think it depends on your scale. So it's really important when you're designing an assessment, how responsive are you? Do you have, for instance, I know that we have, say, BSB WHS 201, we have 42 products on our scope that actually contain that unit. So if you've got 42 different iterations of that assessment, you're in trouble. So if you're looking at scale, you have to determine how quickly you can pivot and respond to anything that comes up. A validation occurs and it's identified as deficient. If that's out there, updating that's really, really hard, especially if you're in the quiz space. I've actually updated live quizzes personally myself, and the complexity of that is it's too large. And when you're looking at that scale, you also have to have a look at the longevity of your courses. So if I've got this in my course and my course is going for the next 4 years, I have to be pretty sure that that's spot on. Because if it's not spot on, essentially it's your learning area that are going to suffer for it, because without compromising your evidence. Alternatively, you can close the quiz off and put in another one. But again, that has repercussions because you'll have to excuse certain students and things like that as well. So it's really important. But also to designing for reasonable adjustment. So I know that we say reasonable adjustment is applied, you know, when and if the occasion occurs. However, if you have regular reasonable adjustments that are requested of your delivery team, it's really important that you design for those. So how is the assessor actually going to use this? So when I'm designing the assessment and I'm selecting, you know, tools and all that side of stuff, if they regularly need an offline copy, well, you know, maybe a quiz isn't the best option. So unless you're using new quizzes, in which case you could potentially print those off, but that's a different conversation. So I guess you need to look at that. Also too, do you have students that are regularly uploading large files? So making sure the design of your assessment accommodates for that, your instructions accommodate for that, the structure of your course, the tools that you're using. If those are what you're asking for the students, we need to actually bring that into the design prior to obviously releasing it. Just relying on like a OneDrive link is really not sufficient. Do you also too need to retain that evidence? Because if you need to retain that evidence, part of your process needs to be that you need to download that link. If it's not retained, well, hey, it doesn't matter if the student actually, because it might be the observation checklist that you're completing or the rubric or however you're doing that, that might be your evidence. So the fact that you may potentially lose the file is actually okay. So you need to think of all of those considerations prior to actually going in and getting really excited about whatever's available to you at the time. I think also too, we need to look at, if we're going to use quizzes, looking at those smaller digestible quizzes. So making sure, so you could have a launching page, for instance, and it might be that from that page, you know, this is your assessment task, and I'm going to go out to about 5 different quizzes in that space. They could be grouped according to their topic, things like that. We use, but also too, your design, you've got to be really careful. Like I saw one the other day where, you know, every time I add a question, I actually preview it. So add, save, preview, add. That's literally how it happens, because sometimes I get off on a tangent and I get super excited. And when I get to the end and I preview, I go, well, that really didn't work, and I've just completely wasted my day. So lots of text in a drop-down box is not okay. It's going to run off the page. Lots of options in a drop-down box. It's going to run down the page. Your students will never manage that on a mobile device. So we've got to be really clever how we do it. Also too, the number of points that you're allocating per question is really important. So if you've got 4 drop-down boxes in one particular quiz question, please allocate 4 points rather than just the one, because students don't understand, why have I got like a 0.25? All of a sudden it's, you know, 0.25. And we do have a process where we use the fudge points to build on the previous attempt. So if you've got fractional numbers, it just makes it impossible. I don't know how your math is, but mine's not as good as it was in year 12. So it's a really, really quick calculation if you're using whole numbers for those quiz questions, which is really important. Also to trialing it. So like Kerry was saying, if you're expecting a student to submit a quiz, and this goes for our teachers as well, because it's really important that they're really comfortable with how this all happens. So if you're collecting evidence as you go, if you're wanting to provide feedback, so 85P is fabulous and things like that. But if you want feedback that you can track throughout that learning process, then use some of the quizzes during your learning, so that way when they get to the assessment, they're comfortable, they're not surprised, there's no issues with the fact that they can or can't use it. So it's really important that they're practiced and well versed by the time that they get there, because otherwise you're not setting them up for success. So, but also to making sure that, you know, if you're using quiz banks and item banks and things like that, there's a lot of work involved in that, a lot of background mapping. If you've got one question that's, you know, and there's 5 different questions, one criteria, and there's 5 different questions from which you can select from, then every one of those needs to be mapped. So I don't know about other people and all the transitioning quals that are coming our way and all those exciting things. However, you probably need to consider the workload, I guess, involved in those as well. So while they seem like a great idea, there is a lot of preparation, and it's also to a lot of workload.
Look, I think that's a really good point, Marita. You know, if we're using a quiz bank for our assessments, we need to make sure that we're asking all the questions we need to ask, and that we're not just dragging questions in from the quiz bank that are all about the same thing and not giving us the coverage we need. So it might sound like a great idea. We'll have all these questions. We'll have lots of different questions coming in. Students are going to see different things. It's going to take the authenticity concerns out of it a lot. But are we compromising the quality of the assessment, the validity of the assessments? It's a very important question. Folks, if you've got questions about quizzes, as you can tell, Marita is the quiz fanatic. Marita spent more time mucking around with quizzes than I ever want to. Sorry, Marita, it's your thing.
You might sound like a nerd.
Well, I think you might be a little bit. I'm just putting it out there. That's okay.
Thanks.
You might be with some other nerds here, and that's all right. I think we're okay. We'll have a cleansing experience. But if you've got questions about quizzes or anything along those lines, folks, or about assessments generally, pop them in the chat so we can answer those questions. But yeah, see, Philip's on it. Go nerds, he says. Thanks, Philip. You're in a safe place here, Marita. There is a question that's just come through from Grace. Grace has written, if the quiz is auto-graded, how do you allow 4 points for a drop-down question when there is no partial grade option for that question? Are you saying our assessors would have to review an auto-graded quiz and provide the fudge points for those questions?
So I'm not entirely sure I 100% understand, but I'll just give it a stab in the dark. So if you've got 4 drop-down boxes in one question, just let me confirm that I've got this right, and you've got 4 points in the top. If the student gets that question as correct, then what will happen is they'll get the whole 4 points. So if there's no partial grade.
Yeah, so just coming back to that, if you're, say, using new quizzes, and I'm pretty comfortable without going there and triple checking this, is that if you're going in and having the 4 questions, right, it's still working on a percentage. So if, say, for instance, Grace, you gave that quiz question 1 point and there was 3 elements that they got correct out of 4, it's going to give them 75% of the total mark of the quiz, right? So what Marita's saying, if you give it 4 marks, right, because it's out of 4, it's actually going to give it 3 out of 4. So in other words, you're making sure that the credible pieces that are actually inside the quiz are actually linked to it. Another really great way to use this is when you think about doing it is if you're using rubrics in your assignments, right? If you've got a scale of competent, not yet competent, each outcome in that rubric is worth 2, or 1. So 1 for competent, 1 not competent. If you use 4 different ones, then that assignment's out of 4, right? If you can think logically like that, because what happens at the end of the day is that you can change the points to the grading scheme that you want to use, right? Because we're obviously using one grading scheme, which is like we want 100% to be competent. Anything below that, 99.9, whatever that may be, to be not yet competent, that will hide all those marks. The only time that that's not hidden is in the final grade column, right? Where a percentage is actually shown. And I know that there are some feature options that are in place to try and remove that, because it can be quite confusing if you've got, depending on the grades and that of what you're using. But if you stick to that plan, that should work. But as always, Grace, if you want to send us an email or book in some time, I can clarify that for you to explain that in a little bit more detail. And I thought Marita said a really good point as well. And it's something that we really see from a student experience point of view, is that like you, when you learned Canvas, you had to learn everything about it. So you had to experience it, you had to do it, and then you're now doing it for your students. Do the same thing for them. If you give them the opportunity, whether it's in an onboarding course or in a module to start, where they can actually practice using the various quizzing and functionality of the system, by the time they get to the ones that actually matter, they're spending more time on answering the quiz versus figuring out how to actually use it, right? And that is really key for a really good student experience, especially if they're going to go through multiple courses in your Canvas thing as part of their cert or what they're trying to achieve as well. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. I think that's one of the easiest ways to create a solid student experience in there as well. But thanks, Marita. That was awesome. It's finally good. Everyone, round of applause for Marita as well. First, as I said, long-time listener, first-time caller. So yeah, awesome.
Folks, what I'd like to do now is there's a question in the chat from Colleen asking, are you using new quizzes? And I'll give Marita a chance to answer that. But while we do that, just just pop in the chat what you use. So there's the old classic quizzes. You can write classic, which is the native build in Canvas in the past. And then there's the new quizzes, which is the new fancy fandangle ones. So I'm just interested to know what people are using. Are you using classic or are you using new quizzes? And I'm seeing a lot of new quizzes in there. Okay, a lot of people are using them. And that's great. And you know, if that's something you guys are interested in, is having a session on the difference between the two of them at some stage, or how to use new quizzes more effectively or something, you know, pop that in the chat and tell us that that sounds like a great idea. And maybe that's something we can consider as well. Marita, I'm guessing you guys are using the new quizzes. Is that correct?
No, we're actually not. I'm going to be the black sheep here.
I'm a
we're
black
actually
sheep
not.
too.
And Adam's probably going to get cross. So
What? Never.
It just depends on your scale. So you've really, look, you know, we have 24,000 students a year. So we need to be really, really careful how this stuff is brought out. Currently, new quizzes aren't able, and I could be wrong, so please 100% correct me if I'm right, with the updating of live quizzes, and also to the there's some concerns around the blueprint. We blueprint everything, so everything that goes out, the template is locked, the assessments are locked. Teachers can bring learning in and out as they like, but those things for, you know, validity purposes and for compliance, they are locked. So if there's a need to update and things like that, we do have some concerns. So we'll transition, but we haven't gone there yet until those things are polished.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I just want to duck back. I want to acknowledge that we've had a couple of questions we haven't answered yet. Paul's made a comment about a heated thread in the Canvas community about new quizzes. Paul, I don't think we're going to go there, because I think if we do, that's going to lead us down a big rabbit hole.
I can answer that super quick if you want, Damien.
Go for super quick.
Yes. It should
There you
be
go.
a heated thing. I actually say to people at the moment as well, if there's any chance you can break your quizzes up into like automated answering and non-automated answering, do it. Okay.
Yes.
Because that means there's one less quiz type that the assessor has to actually see, because they know that one's getting automatically marked. Is there a plan to correct that? Yes. The problem is that new quizzes is a separate LTI. So what it does is it's assuming that everything in there is being automatically marked, hence the reason why they don't get that information. Okay, it can't distinguish with it at the present moment in time. The other thing that Marita mentioned as well about blueprints and new quizzes is that the first time you sync over with using blueprints, new quizzes will work. It's the subsequent syncs that won't. That is something that also does with the fact that you can't import and export new quizzes, you can't upload it to Commons, and you can't share it, right? That is being fundamentally looked at before the deprecation of new quizzes, of classic quizzes, which is scheduled for the end of 2022. Okay, December 2022 for APAC. The reason for that is that's when our school year starts, right? Outside of that, it was going to be done in October. Not ideal. Okay, so it's going to be looking at, and as part of that, there's going to be a migration tool available that turns your new quizzes, your classic quizzes stuff into new quiz content. Okay, so if it's multiple choice, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, if it's something else, we're still working on that at the moment. Okay, but yeah, as I said, there's a discussion on there. I think it's called sunsetting. You can go to the Canvas community and look in sunsetting on new quizzes, read that article, and get involved in constructive conversation, if you could, please.
Thanks, Adam. We have a question from Betsy as well. Betsy has asked, does anyone have any workarounds to improve short answer formats submitted in survey style quizzes so there's no right answer as such? We have some data headaches with students entering dates in all kinds of formats. So Betsy, if you want to jump on the microphone with us, is it the dates that's the issue here?
Yeah, so, you know, in a perfect world, we get day, month, year. And we've corrected that so that you put the day in as a numeric, you put the month in as a numeric, and you put the year in as a numeric. And it is clunky, to say the least. So wonder if anyone has any good ideas, because dates I don't see as a function or an option right now.
Waiting for a genius to stick their hand up and answer Betty's question.
This is why it's a user group, people. Everyone get involved. Put your hand up if you've got it in the thing. If not, If not, put it in go to the vocational education and training group, Betsy, and actually start a question there. And I think I'll put a few of those in the newsletter as well, that people could get involved in and answer. That's the other forum that you can go in and ask these questions as well. So if everyone's a bit quiet and to mention what Damien said, a bit sheepish, we were talking about dogs earlier.
One way I've seen that done is rather than allowing a text field, you'd have 3 drop downs, one for month, one for day, and one for year, and let them put it in that way.
Cool. And similarly, is New Quizzes going to have a survey option?
At this stage, no.
All right.
There's actually there's a document on the Canvas community under the New Quizzes user group. It's called the comparison document. There is a workaround available to simulate what's happening with the survey. But at this particular stage, you can read more about it on that particular document.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it. And thanks, Adam.
Oh, thanks for asking the question. Cheers.
Thanks, Betsy. Folks, there's quite a few questions as well, and Kerry has taken upon herself to answer most of them as you do. So thanks, Kerry. There's some really good answers there. Now, folks, we were going to now transition across to Mr. Ridden, but Julian, unless you stick your hand up and tell us that you've changed your name, I don't think you're here. So Julian, are you here? I'm taking that as a no, because I've given you your chance now, because that's the type of thing Julian would do to trick us, is just change his name to Shirley Harris or something. Apologies if there's a Shirley Harris here. So we don't have our technology expert in the house at the moment. So the issue that Julian was going to address is, how do you leverage technology for better assessment experiences? And we're going to talk about cloud documentation, app usage. I'm just going to throw straight to Adam, because he's a legend. Adam, what's one thing in this sphere that you find is helpful when you're working with RTOs and helping them? What's one or two quick ideas and maybe a cheap win that people can consider?
Yeah, the one thing that I really find awesome, that I feel a lot of people should use, is the use of video, whether that's via Studio or whether that's via video submissions or whatever that may be. I think there's a really good vibe associated with someone loading up a video of them doing something, then getting feedback via, the speed grader, and then going back and resubmitting it. The reason is, look at our world now. Look at everyone who's on this call, right? Like, getting comfortable in front of a video is something that we just had to deal with. And I've got a bad news for you, everyone. It's going to be here for a long time yet, until we've all got VR goggles and we can do some really cool stuff. Okay. So I think it's really important as a life skill, as well as an assessment thing, to give feedback via video. The really cool thing is, in the speed grader, you can give feedback via video as well as the assessor. There's a video option there. So start the correspondence off with video, encourage them to get involved. I think it's like, I do, you do. So I think that's a really easy way you can do it. If you've got Studio, it's a lot smoother, it's a lot better, but you don't necessarily need Studio to do it. But that's me personally, a really easy way with the tools that you've already got and the skills that you've already got, to actually use technology to just create a much better student experience.
Adam, can I just piggyback on you, because we've started using video and audio responses. Yeah, very heavy, unfortunately, Adam, but video and audio responses to some of our student submissions, and they go, oh my gosh, love it. You guys talk to us, we can see your faces. They absolutely love it. The student feedback has been amazing. So Kerry Buttery, you are a legend in these parts as well. Technology, you got a thought or two you'd like to share with us?
Well, we've already talked about H5P. Studio, as Adam said, is awesome. Really having a look on the EduApp Centre to go and see what might work for you. I've been playing with a whole bunch of different Zoom apps this morning, and you can actually get an LTI for Zoom for Canvas. So if you go and have a look in the Zoom store, you'll see that in there. But if you use Teams, you've got some. So if you're doing any live sessions with your students, I'd recommend having a look at what you've got as LTIs that you can use so that you can integrate that straight into your course and make it much, much easier for your students to jump on live sessions with you. There's those using the LTI for Zoom.
Awesome, awesome. Now, Cherie's made a comment here that she's having some issues with students uploading videos because of the upload size. And I know that's an issue we've encountered from time to time. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the video limit is it 500 gigabyte?
Yes. So you can manually go in and change the options for what is uploaded. However, massive asterisks, right? When you're uploading a video to a student or something like that, if it is a massive file and the student has to download it, it's going to suck a lot of data, right? And it's going to take a long time for them to get the experience. Where possible, I love people streaming, right? Or if they can upload the video to, say, a Google Cloud Drive or something like that, and then they can submit via that link. So the folder's open, so the assessor can go in and click on the link and see the videos. Another really cool option. The advantage of Studio, and selfless plug here, and I'm just going to say it, is that when you upload via Studio, it automatically turns it into a streamed file within Canvas. When you submit that, that video automatically pops up in the speed grader. So it's much better experience for the assessors versus someone uploading a file in either of the 20,000 different media files that you could possibly do. Some interact really well with the speed grader. Others, they'll have to click, go to another place to download it and view it. Okay. Just little things like that. You don't want to make it hard. There's some really good third-party apps. I think Rio, was it our client was using the other day? Was it Pancho or something like that? And,
Yeah.
We're useless at each other. What can I say? But what you can do is anywhere that people can sit there and just use their technology inside an app that will compress that and deliver it a lot better, a lot better. I think that's a really cool thing to think of. Once again, Studio is a separate purchasable product that actually works with Canvas. So that's why I'm obviously a bit more favorite for that, because it gives me a job and puts food on the table. But there are plenty of other options there. Can you put them on YouTube and then drop a YouTube link in there? Yes. Encourage your users to stream on video if they can. That would be cool. Like private direct link, right? But once again, going back to what Marita said, get them to practice doing that first before they have to do an assignment or assessment that counts. That's the key thing. So they can get all those bugs out of the way. They know how to work and they're a lot more confident with that. That's one thing I definitely stress to all my customers, because that's just going to lead to a much better student experience.
Can I jump in there, Damien, just briefly? Compliance perspective. If the video is evidence for assessment and you don't have control of it, then, if a student removes that from wherever they've got it, you don't have that as your evidence for your retention period. So if that's the case, but you've got your observation checklist that you are completing from the video assessment, and you've got your decision-making tool there completed, then that's okay, because usually you'd be doing that in a live setting where they're in front of you and you don't have video of that. So just think about whether the evidence that you are gathering via video is something that you must retain for audit purposes. And if it is, you need to have control of it.
Yeah, really good point, Kerry. And yes, Rio, you do have a cute kid. And Rio, I also appreciate you correcting me. It wasn't 500 gigabytes, it was 500 megabytes. Just one letter. Hardly makes any difference, really.
That's a huge difference for all the nerds out there that like counting zeros. Just an FYI, there's about 6 or 7.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. There's been a couple of people talking about Studio in the chat, and also Paul, you obviously using Zapier extensively as well to connect other apps into Canvas. That's very cool. Folks, we might wrap up the main thrust of our main discussion here, though.
Sorry, Damien, I was just going to ask. Yeah? Sorry, Marita, we were talking about this on an email before. You said there's some great third-party apps that you currently use for assessment and stuff for an experience. Did you want to mention those now publicly, or did you want to take that on?
Well, look, I'm happy to. I think, and again, it also too depends on your scale. It's always about your scale. If you're a smaller RTO and you have more control and less teachers, then there's less risk. The greater your scale, the greater the risk. So we have some really valid concerns about, because we blueprint everything, about putting our things in to say comments and allowing teachers to draw down from there and things like that, because if they're in a blueprint, they can't be locked when they come from comments and things like that. So we need to maintain a source of truth, and comments isn't it for us, not for any reason other than the fact is that we can't lock it. So we're really significantly looking at things like atomic via Learnosity, because that's, again, with the new quizzes, it's a plugin. You can actually turn around and manage. So when things are actually updated, and then you can archive the old one, update the new one, things like that. So however, I'm really interested to see where new quizzes go. It's simply because it's looking a little more atomic every day. So it gives you that offline option. The other big thing is everyone asks, well, where do I put my teacher guide? So in terms of it, yeah, I know it's the big, I was going.
Put it on the list, put it on the list, put it
on the list. But when we tested Atomic, we actually they have a quiz tool and it's used for everything. So therefore, there is no assignment, it's just quiz. So, but because their options are fairly significant. So it gives you that archiving process and that ability to pivot really fast. So that's important. But yeah, it's worth a look.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much. Now, I need to move things along because we've still got a couple of agenda items, folks. So sorry for me cracking the whip here, but we need to head across to you, Adam. Adam, as we often do during these chats, there's some new features you want to tell us about in Canvas. So let's get to the sexy stuff.
Yeah. So a few of you have spoken to me before about having students can't see previous assignment submissions because of the nature of the assignment window. I would like to let you know, and I haven't rolled this out to everyone just yet. And if you are a studio client, I'd still like you to hold off at the moment because that is the last little bug that we need to get fixed. But in your feature options, there is something called assignment enhancements for students. Now, by turning that on, you essentially, one of the big things that I think will benefit everyone here is that previous attempts can be seen by the student, right? Okay, you can actually, so the teachers look exactly the same. They can go back and see it, but students can go in there and see it as well. The other thing that's really cool that it didn't have before, we call it the pizza tracker affectionately because we like food, but in theory, it works like dominoes. It tells the student via a graph where it is in the cycle. So has it been submitted? Has it been marked? Has it been released? It's actually like a picture menu that can clearly articulate to the student where their assignment actually is. So if you want to, you can actually turn that on. My only suggestion to you is once you turn it on, don't turn it off, okay? Because the way that it works, it's giving students access to their first and previous views. If you go that back, there is a little bit of a glitch there with what it does with marks. My suggestion is go into the beta environment, go into your test environments, turn on that functionality. It will automatically turn all your assignments into the new student view, act as the test student, get familiar with it. If it's what you want, then turn it on in your production environment, okay? Or save it for the end of the year. So when you go live in the new year, these will all be on. From a teacher standpoint, nothing will change, okay? So from assessor, trainer's point of view, nothing will change. It's purely the look and feel from the student's point of view as well. So I'd just like to clear that as well. The next one is for those who have already got Studio coming next month, well, September pretty much. You can previously upload your own content. You could link off YouTube content. You can now link off Vimeo content as well. So as long as you've got the link to the Vimeo content, you can put that into Studio and use things like quiz questions. You can use things such as, what have I said? Quiz questions, analytics, who's watched it, who's viewed it, when they've jumped off, all that sort of stuff as well. So that's going to be going live in September. Now, the last one is probably the simplest thing that we could do that will help everyone here. In the chat, put your hand up if you spent all this time designing a course and someone, maybe a trainer, maybe assessor, or someone in the course has gone in and deleted something. Like a quiz, like a page, like everything. Okay, cool. I know the people because the first thing you do is you call me stressed going, how do I get it back? Okay, so what we are doing now is as of this month, you may have already noticed that certain permissions are already granular. Okay, so you can go into the permissions now for the courses for say your teachers, your trainers, your assessors, whatever you want to use if you're using Canvas teachers. Yep, help desk, undelete, doesn't work all the time. Do not call me up to say the undelete button didn't work. Okay, not my problem. It shouldn't have been there in the first place. I don't like referencing it ever. But the good thing is now is that we can actually change in Canvas the permission for quizzes and assignments. The one option used to be add, edit, delete was one option. Add, edit, and delete will now be 3 different options. So you can actually granularize your permissions. So for trainers coming in, you can actually take away their ability to edit and delete quizzes or edit and delete assignments, right? And considering that is going to cause most of the conjecture when it comes to audit, if stuff like that is deleted, my suggestion is turn those permissions off, right? Give them the permissions to go in there. For people who use Blueprint with the locking as well, this will just further strengthen your resolve for them to go in there and do that, okay? So that's another little bit of pieces that I think is going to be a very subtle change that will just give you a lot more confidence that you've developed this content, somebody else is teaching it, and they might not have the same experience of Canvas as you do and don't understand what the big red button means, okay? I think that's going to be a really, really handy thing. Once again, if you do have time, I always recommend go to the Canvas community and go and visit the product roadmap. That will actually tell you what's coming out a month or so in advance. And just remember as well, if you want to test any of these features, your beta instance is always the version ahead of what's about to be released in Canvas. Go in there and test stuff. Break it as much as you like. I do not mind. That is why it's there, okay? It's really important that you go in there and understand these sorts of things, because when we talk about these sorts of things, like if someone goes, oh, what's new quizzes? Thank goodness no one said that. That was awesome. There's obviously these little things that will come in and go, hey, I've got this problem, okay? This is the best place to go in there and try and fix those sorts of things. So we are getting a lot more better at communicating those. Everything we're trying to do is very public now. You might notice that with all the product logs that's being released. Someone mentioned the sunsetting of new quizzes and the heated discussion that is happening. Totally get it. But that's what comes with being transparent with you as the customer. Okay, so just make sure that you go in there and double check that. As always, if you're a member of the Priority Services team, you can always reach out to us via csteamapac@instructure.com. For those who have a designated CSM, please feel free to reach out to them as well, and we'll be able to provide some feedback, provide direction, and all those sorts of things. But I think those little things are going to be really just little small things that are just going to make your workflow and give you a little bit more confidence before you go out there as well. But I'm going to zip it. So Damien, back to you.
Yeah, zip it up because we're running out of time. Good stuff. Thank you, Paul, for jumping in first and providing the address for the beta. So it's your RTO, whatever it is, .beta.instructure.com. And when you go in there, you can't break anything on your production site. Okay, so don't be scared about going there. You can't do any harm to the real world. Adam, I'm going to ask you to close up, please. And the first thing that you're going to talk about here is just the administrative stuff, but also you're going to tell us about the October topic. So please give the big reveal. What are we talking about next month? Microphone, mate.
Classic work from home problem. So next month, what we're actually going to do is we've just talked about how we're going to design assessment, okay, and how the best ways to go about it. Next thing we're going to do is the best way to provide feedback. once they've actually lodged that, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to engage? Versus Kerry said, is it an assessment or is it a formative, summative task? How do we engage between both? The development of resources to help your trainers use these feedback options to create a much more diverse level. The feedback library in the speed grader. If you haven't found it yet, my goodness, rock your world. Absolutely. Go in there, use it. It's amazing. Okay. But once again, I'll be sending a copy of this recording out as well. I'll also be sending out the information for next month's one. I may be passing the mantle over to Rio or someone else because my wife is due on pretty close to that due date. So if I'm not here, lucky all of you. So yeah, outside of that, keep smiling. Please feel free to put any specific questions related to the industry in that vocational education and user group, because I can answer it a lot faster. If you just put it in the Canvas ecosystem, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. That was really fun. I hope you got a lot out of it. And remember, if you want to reach out to anyone on here as well, private message them, ask for their details. That's what we want to create. We want to create a really diverse community in here. So these user groups keep kicking on. But thank you, Marita. Thank you, Kerry. Thanks, Damien. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Be kind to small children and adults. See you later.